always taking them to a live grocery store. You know, it can be beneficial for the right level of technician, but it's not always the best thing to do, especially for your entry level guys. You need a place to do that. And we've certainly done that. We've got 3 training centers right now, and more to come. But we've got our corporate operations outside of Chicago. We're about a 3,000 square foot mock grocery store we built. It's got a rack system. It's got a all the different cases that you would typically see in a grocery store, all the different control systems. You know, Bob mentioned parts, and it's like, wow, you know, it's like there's a lot of manufacturers, there's a lot of aged equipment, there's a lot of parts to deal with. So we train them through that. We have a classroom curriculum as well. We built a new one in Austin, Texas, in last year. Working on one in Cleveland right now, and then hopefully we'll get one on the West Coast by the end of next year. But again, even that's very expensive. It's costly to build these things and pull them all together. We have an entire learning and development team that their entire life mission is focus is training people. And then we don't even stop there. I think it's also important not just to train people, but to make sure that the people training people know how to train people. Because there's so many great technicians out there that are super smart, and they want to be trainers, but they don't necessarily have the acumen to really understand how to connect to people and how to help them understand what it is they're trying to teach them. So we've made huge investments in what we call trainers, where we bring in an outside third-party firm to help teach our trainers that are going to be training our folks how to deliver the message and make sure they get the buy-in and what they need out of that. And, that's been a super successful program for us as well, and it's important. It's helped us leverage our bases across the country and all of our different branches as well. So now we have certified trainers in every one of our branches, or almost at least, that are using our digital curriculum, where we don't have a training center. They can pull it off the digital library, if you will, and train in the local branch, set up certain things. We work with partners like Scorlin and Hill Phoenix and such to be able to complement what we've got with the stuff that they've got already developed. And then beyond that, though, it's having the right people in the right place to do the training is so important, and having the tools available to do it as well. One other thing that we've done that I believe will help, I hope will help, not only our customers and retailers, but also our industry a little bit with this, you know, I'll reflect back to the 5 o'clock on Friday for the cases that I spent for a week. I set my learning development team on a mission 6 months ago to work with some store manager level people, and we developed a one-day training for store managers to help them understand what it is they need to be looking for, they can be looking for, to eliminate a lot of those nuisance calls. And sometimes, we're certainly not telling them they need to fix it themselves, but when it's a door open or it's a nice step coil or something like this, there are things that can be done to avoid that emergency after hours call and avoid those weekend calls as well when there's not a lot we can do and the ice is 6 inches thick. And I know sometimes the technicians, they get sold, they try to get sold on this, and managers tell them, that ice was not there yesterday, but when it's got the stalagmite going to the floor, we're pretty sure it's at our slack tax. We're pretty sure it didn't just start yesterday.
So it's a very large group of fluorinated chemicals. And the challenge here is that it's not defined consistently amongst different groups, not scientists, not regulators, various publications. Everyone has a slightly different definition for what's PFAS and what are the problematic PFAS. How do we evaluate PFAS? One of the best known polymeric PFAS is PTFE or Teflon. It's in a lot of things that we use today, HVAC and refrigeration equipment included. And so as we look across the different regions that have regulation today, we look at the definitions, and they're not all different, but there are significant differences between some of them. And so Europe, through the REACH regulation, their definition is pretty broad. It picks up, I've heard 9,000 chemicals that fall under this regulation. And with a few exceptions, a few derogations, everyone else is expected to move away from PFAS potentially by 2026. That regulation is still being, will be finalized in 2026, but that regulation is still being worked on. And so we don't know exactly where that's going to land. The US EPA has a much different definition. They've taken a much more risk-based approach here, really focusing on water contamination and environmental pollution with their efforts so far under TSCA. Delaware has a different definition, which actually excludes gases and volatile liquids and really focuses on PFOA and PFOS, which are those chemicals that have caused a lot of that water contamination.
In 2019, global production of electric vehicles was 2 million. In 2021, global production was 6 million. It tripled in 2 years. Started getting frantic phone calls in July and August of 21. I was just told by my electrical steel supplier I'm going to be put on allocation for 2022. That they're going to give the electric vehicle makers all the steel they want, and we get the leftovers. And I was told this by some huge companies. Think of how big the companies are who make motors, generators, distributors. These aren't itty-bitty companies. And they're being told they have no priority compared to electric vehicles. That they're at the bottom of the queue and they get the leftovers. Not something they're used to hearing. And in 2022, electric vehicle production was 8.7 million, and there was a shortage that started in motors, generators, and transformers. So 6 million in 21 was the last year the market cleared. EV production by 2026 will be 20 million units. EV production by 2030 will be 40 million. EV production by 2035 will be 65 million. Out of 95 million vehicles, 65 million will be EV. That is a big growth in demand for electrical steel for motors. It's a big growth in demand for transformers to charge those cars. Oh, and by the way, we're adding wind towers, we're adding grid work, we're adding electrification just at the root system for utilities and people like you as you build stores. There's not enough steel to go around. My advice is very simple, and it's the second worst thing a buyer can ever hear. The worst thing a buyer can hear is, we're not gonna get delivery. The second worst thing a buyer can hear is, buy at any price, lock in supply and ignore price. Well, that's where we are. From huge engineering, procurement, construction firms, EPC, the people who build the power grid, the people who do all the energy work, the biggest companies with revenue of $30 to $50 billion a year face lead times of 2 to 6 years in getting transformers. The worst is the very middle, the things that you need. The huge transformers for cross-country power grids are bad. Smaller transformers for essentially solenoids are bad. Transformers to run a factory, transformers to pull things down off the grid, that's where the lead times are horrible. 2 to 6 years. And I'm not making that up. Motors, for motors and generators, the things you put in a wind tower, the things you put in a large, some of your larger machinery, some of the things that would drive your HVAC. We're getting to lead times of 2 years and growing. If you have anything that transforms electricity, buy now. It's not going to get better. That electric vehicle production is going to keep going up. And yes, they are adding steel capacity. But steel capacity is growing like this, and demand is growing like that. You're adding, I can count the number of electrical steel mills that are being added that I know of on my hands. I can count, and I should need both hands, both feet, and half of the audience to keep up with what's going on with EVs. It just doesn't match. So it's bad and it's gonna get worse. Don't expect relief. Don't expect if you wait, things will improve. Not going to be the case. It's the exact opposite. And this is really bad news. So it's holding up projects. There are EPC companies who are refusing work on doing grid work because they can't get transformers, which means less expansion of the power grid. It's a situation we're in. It can be solved if steel mills add capacity at a frantic rate. But then we have political things here saying EVs are just a fad, and therefore we don't need to add it, and that's what we've just been told in the US. Strenuously disagree. That's not political, that's what we see for consumer demand. But if people think it's a fad and they don't add more steel mills, this will get even worse. So I've given you a lot of good news, and I think it is really good news. This is the first time in a long time, but the exception is really bad. And I'm trying to make you panic, because panic is a rational reaction. Because it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse.
There are many examples and sizes of commercially available CO2 systems. Some of the concerns around CO2 are the increased energy usage in warmer climates, the use of other natural resources, such as water, and the need for more qualified and experienced technicians due to increased pressure and required specialized technology. For R290 or propane, due to it being flammable, there are factors such as charge limitations that create capacity limitations of the equipment. I did find, however, studies that indicated standalone propane units showing improved efficiencies when compared with their replacements. Ammonia is also a natural refrigerant with a GWP of 0, and it has shown increased energy efficiencies in the system. There are a handful of commercial refrigeration systems within the United States, but with the higher toxicity, it is difficult to find an install location for a commercial refrigeration system utilizing ammonia. Currently, one of the system types available for A1 refrigerants while adhering to the EPA's pending regulation are cascade and secondary systems. A system in which an A1 refrigerant is the primary being the high side of your cistern, removing the heat from the secondary system and rejecting its heat to the outdoors. For medium temperature fixtures, the primary A1 would provide chilling for either CO2 pumped or glycol, and for the low temperature fixtures, the primary A1 would provide condensing for a subcritical CO2 system. I would like to note that only the R47A refrigerant having a GWP of less than 150 could be direct expansion in medium temperature fixtures. The use of R515B may not be possible for this application due to the total pounds of refrigerant required in a typical commercial refrigeration system.